Few tales are told of Hades, whose very name inspires fear and penitence, reminding us of the inevitable fate which we all share. I, however, mean to tell you such a tale. Listen carefully. Good to see you, lad, despite the circumstances. Remember your training out there. The pain of death is but another obstacle. Let us continue then our tale from before. Let us continue then our tale from before. Let us continue then our tale from before. Let us sing more then of the champion of the gods. Let us sing more then of the champion of the gods. Let us sing more then of the champion of the gods. Let us sing more then of the champion of the gods. The bedchambers of Prince Zagreus lie in a perpetual state of utter disarray, despite his lord and master of the house repeatedly insisting that he pick everything up. The infernal wares of the Stygian boatman Charon lie sprawled about, available for sale to whomever would be willing to quench the boatman's great thirst for riches. The courtyard of the house of Hades is kept neat and orderly, in contrast to the terrifying sprawl that lies beyond, composed of such innumerable, ever-shifting, interlocking chambers. The underworld of Lord Hades all but guarantees the dead shall there remain until the end of time. The house of Hades, that dark and lavishly appointed lair of the underworld's king, is home not just to him, but to his willful progeny. Thus did Prince of the Underworld Zagreus absorb the contents of this hidden letter, written in his mother's hand. Thus did the prince discover, inadvertently, the well-kept truth about his lineage. Entirely by chance, this did occur. Persephone, the one-time queen of all the underworld. Where had she gone? And why? Engulfed by newfound questions and his rage, the prince decided to confront his lord and master. All is quiet at this time. Ever-dreaming Hypnos put a spell upon the house, as willful Zagreus had asked of him. All are fast asleep, save for the prince. It is exactly as he planned. He ventures toward the stately throne of his lord-father, half expecting to be caught, but ill expecting what he is about to find. He does not know exactly what he seeks. He only knows that something always has felt off to him, that he does not belong. Who is he, really? Lord Hades never would indulge such questions, so Prince Zagreus would find out for himself. He rifles through his lord-father's possessions. There is not much of any import there. Ledgers and administrative parchment work, correspondence from Olympus which he had ignored. No trace of any reference to his son. But then there is the note, written finally in a hand and voice the likes of which the prince had never seen or heard. Cerberus looks mournfully toward the prince. The prince and Cerberus exchange a look. The watchdog Cerberus observes the prince. Cerberus cannot be bothered at this time. Cerberus is comfortably at rest, observing all. Cerberus lies as ever at the foot of his lord-master's throne. Cerberus makes no attempt to move. Cerberus is busily considering upon what else to gnaw. Cerberus goes about his business, gnawing in this case. Cerberus is preoccupied with scratching and biting at himself. Cerberus is uninterested in conversing at this time. Cerberus promises to do exactly that, in his own way. The watchdog Cerberus merely sulks upon his supple bedroll. Cerberus is overjoyed to have received such a delicious treat. Cerberus yelps in merriment upon receiving such a generous offering. Knowing the watchdog's never-ending appetite for treats, the prince obliges him. As one of Cerberus's heads receives the prince's gift, another muzzles something back into his hand. Each time the prince delves back into the underworld, its ever-shifting chambers realign to frustrate his attempts to perhaps map it out. The lounging area within the House of Hades is a dismal place to be, in spite of its intended purpose to enliven the house's grim inhabitants. Shades of the dead mill constantly within the house, complaining of their woes, and seeking audience from any who would listen. A place of calm and respite, whilst perhaps unimaginable in the underworld, occasionally is to be found. In fact, the path from Tartarus is finally laid bare. Far above, the heat from Phlegethon, the river of flame, is faintly felt already, even as its dangers lie in wait. Within the suffocating heat of Asphodel reside the vast majority of those who lived upon the earth and died. There they persist until the end of time, the deepest reaches of the underworld, the void from which all life and consciousness sprang forth during the dawn of time, the realm of chaos, a land almost unseen even to denizens of Death's kingdom. It is the dead of night, or the approximation of it in the realm of Hades. Prince of the underworld Zagreus rises from a fitful slumber, with much mischief on his mind. Infernal watchdog Cerberus regards the underworld prince with mixed emotions, from purest joy to deepest melancholy. Each terrifying maw of the infernal watchdog Cerberus responds affirmatively, one after the next, as if to reassure the ever-doubting prince. The venerable hound of hell barely acknowledges the softly spoken prince's platitude, knowing full well the underworld is not as vigilantly guarded as in ages past. Despite the underworld prince's optimism, his old companion Cerberus, the multi-headed hound, maintains a somewhat sulky attitude for now. The underworld prince's casual inquiry serves but to frustrate the infernal hound, as none of his 3 heads possess the gift and curse of speech. The hound of hell rests peacefully upon his favored spot. All 3 of Cerberus the watchdog's terrifying countenances greet the prince. The vicious 3-faced guard-hound of the gates of death barks out a brief hello. The ever-faithful Cerberus remains resting steadfastly in his spot. Notoriously vicious Cerberus is watching quietly his master's court. One of the frightful maws of Cerberus busily grooms the other 2. The triple-headed monster Cerberus is dutifully sitting there as ever. The many-headed Cerberus is busy thinking of his next savory meal. Cerberus acknowledges the prince with an affection tempered well with time. The hellish watchdog snarls at the listless shades crowding about the court. The much-feared Cerberus licks endlessly at something on the floor. Thus, having stilled the deathless raging of the bone-forged Hydra, willful Zagreus now presses ever forward, upward, toward his goal, the surface, where his long-lost birth-mother resides. The myriad of challenges and dangers that wait beyond the flame-hot river shall be revealed and overcome upon a later time. Let us imagine that the prince did not go far before falling once more into his father's house. Imagine, if you will, the underworld prince soon meets one of his typical ignoble deaths. For now, there is no more to say or show from here, so let us say instead that Zagreus was cruelly killed. Again, beyond this point, our tale of the underworld's determined prince cannot further continue at this time. But time does not stand still, and more, much more, shall someday be revealed. The trials of Prince Zagreus have only just begun. Our tale of the underworld prince is far from finished, but the rest of it shall have to wait until another time. The tale of death-defying Zagreus shall continue at a later time. The valor of the great-hearted Achilles is immortalized upon the prince's wall, as though it might stir up more courage from within. The visage of the goddess Aphrodite now adorns the prince's bedchambers, perhaps to provide consolation after when next he dies. The shattered weapons of the siege of Ilion are now reduced to window dressings in the prince's ever-cluttered lair. What once was a small lounging area within the house of Hades now is sealed off, in utter shambles, since the multi-headed Cerberus tore the space apart, mourning the missing prince. The guilt-racked monster Cerberus admits to committing the crime, expressing some remorse for having implicated the incendiary prince. Each savage countenance of Cerberus lights up to hear the news, doubtless beginning to assemble stratagems for ravaging the lounging area once more. Beyond the present chamber lies the outermost perimeter of Tartarus, promising terrifying dangers far beyond the underworld prince's reckoning. Having traversed the flaming river Phlegethon to gain this vantage point, relentless Zagreus must now confront a foe of unimaginable savagery, who lies ahead, awaiting patiently its time to strike. The searing flame and ashes of the river Phlegethon mean nothing to the ferryman Charon, who travels all the waters of the underworld bearing the dead, the damned, and all their fineries. Hidden well within the limitless inferno of the river Phlegethon, somehow a trickle of life-giving water yet remains, as though provided by the fates themselves unto the very lucky prince. Within the depths of Tartarus reside the most wretched of all the shades who linger for eternity within the underworld, whose lord and master is especially unkind to those attempting to cheat death. The once verdant plains of Asphodel are now engulfed in scintillating flame, having been flooded by the river Phlegethon, whose hideously superheated contents could bring death swiftly even to those resistant to most heat. The fathomless expanses hidden in darkest corners of the underworld stretch well past the notice of Lord Hades himself, and yet the interfering prince somehow discovers passage there. Within the underworld's quietest, most solitary, darkest abyss lies hidden evidence of the beginning of all things, of chaos, the most ancient sculptor that has shaped this world. A beautifully decorated, subtly enchanted ball, containing traces of the hapless prince's past attempts to flee the underworld, now accents a particularly cluttered corner of his room. The underworld prince is getting rather good at this, but let us say he perished anyhow. Alas, the wisely spoken Zagreus stumbled upon a pit of deadly spears, perhaps. Then, valiantly striding Zagreus was set upon by 7 bloodless slam-dancers and slain, or something of the sort. The duty-shirking prince then met another of his fated deaths, in fashion best left to imagination. Prince Zagreus proceeded onward toward a certain doom, entirely too graphic to describe. Beyond this point lies such a horrifying fate that we had better speak no more of it for now. Just then, how about a very small, yet very deadly beetle landed upon Hydra-slaying Zagreus, ending his attempt. The never-learning Zagreus then carelessly fell off a precipice or something, plunging him into the rapids of the Styx. The unrelenting underworld prince again vainly attempted to proceed beyond the current limits of this tale. The hint-ignoring prince again attempted to transgress, to no avail, into domains not yet prepared for his arrival. The burning fields of Asphodel again proved unable to stop the flame-resistant prince, but then misfortune struck, just like it always does. Although there are innumerable ways for one to die, our danger-seeking prince has come to know a sizable variety. The clever-minded prince again eluded certain death, up to a certain point, but then, predictably, made one of his fatal mistakes. Again, the master of this realm, Lord Hades, states that death is inescapable. There is considerable credence to his claim. The oft-impatient Zagreus appears to take repeated deaths in stride, and so, here comes another one for him. Concealed in the dark recesses of the underworld is the land of Erebus, wherein the dead await eternal sentencing. They long for the attention and good graces of their master, the Lord Hades. The river Styx flows infamously through the underworld, offering the boatman Charon expeditious travel from the realm of mortals to the lowest depths, where many of their shades reside forever. The rare heavenly splendors of Elysium, reserved for only the most great of mortal souls, spread forth luxuriantly all about the fire-stepping prince. The enshrouded river of forgetfulness, Lethe, flows through the hallowed chambers of Elysium, numbing old pains and memories of the most noble shades residing there. Within the delicately hewn constructions of Elysium exist places of peace so utterly serene and absolute as mortal kind is seldom to experience during the average short and often painful coil. The vast and multitudinous riches of both the surface and the underworld are hoarded by the river boatman Charon, whose services are often tendered to the wealthiest within Elysium. The magnificently ominous facade of the great Elysian Stadium looms tall above the rabble-rousing prince, as if to goad him into such a competition which he cannot hope to win. Amid Elysium's moss-covered chambers, carved of stone, stand untold numbers of eternal monuments in tribute to the greatest heroes which mortality can offer, there to honor them in life as well as death. Well past the flaming river escalates the hidden stair toward the most well-guarded, splendorous environment within the underworld. The heavenly Elysium, home eternal to the greatest souls which ever lived. The god-forsaken Minotaur impresses then upon a parchment a brief message to the god of sleep, and gives it to the favor-asking prince. Having ventured successfully much farther than before, the surface-seeking prince encounters setbacks far too hideous to be described. Thus did the fate-confronting prince traverse Elysium, where he discovers, to his great dismay, such horrors as can only be detailed at some other later time. As hero thwarting Zagreus approaches perilously closer to the surface, he perhaps gets caught within a rockfall of some sort. With oft undocumented dangers of Elysium well behind him, now Prince Zagreus faces an even greater threat, one which I shall get back to you about. Whilst well within arm's reach of victory, the bold defeating prince succumbs to a large pack of sinisterly harmless-seeming rodents. So stifling is the thick darkness past Elysium that the ill-fated prince there bumps his head extremely hard and dies. Just then, the carefree running underworld prince runs headlong into a thick and deadly wall of stone, painted to look like the way out. Beyond the splendors of Elysium, the ever-patient prince shall find his fate eventually, but not right now because, oh no, watch out! Filled with such confidence, the prince neglected to avoid, stepping on a toxic strain of fungus, so rare you'd not have heard of it. So joyfully did Zagreus attempt to gain the surface that, why, he just rose too quickly, and we know how that one goes from Icarus's tale. Thus, having vanquished the heroic king of Athens, willful Zagreus now presses ever forward, upward, toward his goal, the surface, where his long-lost birth-mother resides. Pretend our deftly-footed prince did not survive the boastings of the champion back there. The multi-headed Cerberus stands vigilant before the underworld's entryway. The tales of what happens to those foolish enough to attempt to pass are far too graphic to describe. After a moment's hesitation and deliberation, the voracious hound of hell barks once, affirmatively toward the prince, who sets off in search of something that can sate the monster's appetites. Terrifying Cerberus accepts the fetid sack and scans the darkened hall for where best to consume the stomach-turning contents. Cerberus again accepts the sack. At last the willful prince has ventured all the way up to the surface of the mortal realm, yet still he is encased within the earth itself, the gateway to the underworld, a threshold from which there is no escape. The vast temple of Styx and its innumerable dangers now are all that separate the underworld prince from the land outside, which he so desperately longs to see. Not far from here, the dead begin their journey to their final resting place down in the depths below, and so the river boatman Charon often passes through. The widely feared and many-headed Cerberus, the underworld sentinel, presides over the entrance to this realm, devouring whole those fool enough to make attempts to flee. A crudely hewn network of tunnels grows from one of the cold temple's flanks, containing vicious denizens unwelcome in this realm, even in death. Deep within the desecrated lair of the god-defiling satyrs lie the noisome contents of their profane rituals, so foul as to be indescribable. Seldom does the overbearing throne of grim Lord Hades sit unoccupied. Thus the house's denizens all go about their business, daring not so much as to ask why. Gigantic Cerberus accepts the prince's foul offering. The fearsome Cerberus accepts the satyr sack, The prince persuades the underworld's ferocious guardian to move aside. The prince compels the multi-headed hound to let him pass. Thus has the prince again persuaded fearsome Cerberus to get out of his way. Joyfully the hound of hell accepts another satyr sack. The fear-inducing hellhound eyes the underworld prince uneasily, his 6 ferocious eyes, each glistening within the dim light of the house, thus having somehow vanquished his own father, the grim god of the dead. Defiant Zagreus is finally set free to seek the hidden place in which his long-lost birth-mother resides. How shall that all work out for him? Alas, it is as yet too soon to say. Pretend, for now, that the Lord Hades absolutely clobbered him. Having somehow defeated grim Lord Hades in a thrilling fight, Prince Zagreus discovers it was all a dream. A rather deadly nightmare, actually. Despite having transcended past the confines of the underworld yet again, Prince Zagreus proves utterly unable to get past this point. Imagine that Prince Zagreus experiences some sort of joyous outcome for a change, in contrast to the arbitrary and unfortunately painful death he shall experience now. After defeating his Lord Father yet again, Prince Zagreus begins to shiver and catch cold, and, as is well known, there sadly is no cure for such a thing. As he explores the wonders of the world, Prince Zagreus discovers a quaint farm in which he carelessly trespasses, stepping on a farming tool which swoops up and strikes him in the forehead, fatally. One might suppose the prince's tale most likely ends akin to other tales of the heroes of our time, like so. Among the countless splendid gemstones hidden underneath the earth, a great many are used to decorate the house of Hades, god of the dead, god of riches. Water is the source of life, yet still it flows within the darkest underworld recesses, whilst restless shades of mortals look upon it and recall the short days they could drink it and draw breath. The gemstone-bearing prince commissioned such a finely crafted fountain for the house that all the shades who witnessed it still think of him quite fondly ever since. A commemorative board adorns one of the stoic walls within the lounging area, celebrating and proclaiming the accomplishments of those who serve Lord Hades best of all. The dead have utterly no use for sustenance, although they try to feast upon it anyway, as though imagining the customs of the mortal life brings them some sense of peace. Having invested heavily into the cooking area within the House of Hades, the empty-stomached Zagreus can nonetheless find nothing fit to eat. From within a humble residence in Asphodel reverberates the golden-sounding voice of lorn Eurydice, who once attempted to escape the underworld and failed utterly, much like Prince Zagreus. The favor-doing Zagreus then walks into a chamber black as night, but with a blood-red pool, and from it comes a voice which says, "Would you mind diving in these waters, Prince?" To which the prince replies, "Oh, sure." Mere moments from his final victory, the prince, in his great haste, ignored surveying each side of a rather busy crossing, where a swiftly passing chariot collided with him very forcefully. The often dying prince, having achieved his purpose, then reflects upon his life and deeds, remembering his many past demises with such vivid clarity that this occurs. In his great hurry to explore the countryside, the hapless-footed prince steps on the peel of a most exotic, sallow-colored fruit, and tumbles backward with such sudden violent force that you know what occurs. There are a myriad of tales to be told, of both great deeds and of vainglorious defeats, and this has been a tale that falls somewhere in the middle overall. "He cannot kill me like this every time," believes the underworld prince. "He shall eventually have no more ideas." But the prince, as often is the case, is wrong. The fate-abetting prince perhaps believes it was through his own choice that he procured the fated list of minor prophecies, but it was preordained. Just when his victory was all but certain, a fissure opens underneath the feet of the ill-fated prince, and from it vents a cloud of superheated water vapor, steam, as it is known. and probably you know what happens next. Inside the filth-encrusted layers, carved into the looming edifices of the underworld, lie such terrible abominations that not even grim Lord Hades is inclined to speak of them. One of these days, or nights, not so very long from now, the prince may finally traverse beyond this point. And then, what shall become of him and I? Well, hopefully not this. A vast and intricately crafted mosaic depicts the underworld king presiding over the enormity of his domain, whilst its chthonic residents look on in awe of him. The ever-energetic prince, alas, remains incapable of sitting still, even with such a supple, comfortable seating arrangement nestled in his chambers now. A massive set of weights, positioned carefully in line of sight of any visitors, shall doubtless make them think the prince is stronger and in better shape than in reality. An object intricately carven solely for the purposes of recreation now resides within the pleasure-seeking prince's chambers, although his lack for an opponent limits its appeal. Within the house's gallery now sits the bust of a distinguished poet, ruggedly handsome in his age, who, although yet to earn his fated fame, shall probably be better known some day. A delicately crafted instrument of music-making now resides within the clamour-causing prince's chambers, doubtless fearing, if it could, his heavy-handed touch. Much of the softness of the richly woven rug the prince procured cannot be fully felt beneath his flame-licked feet. The frightful countenance of a bleached, bloodless warrior decorates the hall forevermore, eternally in tribute to the savage servants of the house's lord. The perfect chiseled physicality of one of Greece's greatest ever heroes now adorns the house's gallery, reminding most onlookers of many ways in which they fail to compare. The vastly irritating prince gets no response. The prince decides he's better things to do. The often dying prince but wastes his time. Perhaps the good prince ought to do something else. Upon the surface realm, the mortal-loving prince would doubtless find that death still comes in a variety of different forms. One of the most common, yet perhaps least interesting, involves simply waiting long enough until the heavy sleeping underworld prince arises, with the feeling that the brief nap he intended as a respite from the rigors of the day or night apparently was none too brief at all. Responsibility-rejecting Zagreus strides down his father's hall, quite unconcerned about the urgency with which he is expected to behave under a set of circumstances such as this. The door to the administrative chamber beckons just beyond the hall. The prince perchance believes that he may enter quietly, without drawing the notice of those laboring within. The day or night's duties are sheer simplicity itself, at least at first, as when the prince simply signs in to signal the commencement of his shift. The often failing prince attempts to sort the ledgers in the fashion necessary for the proper keeping of his father's realm. The training lacking prince's efforts to administer approvals to the judgment terms ultimately leave a lot to be desired. The hard-laboring shades responsible for the administration of the prince's father's realm merely look on at the prince's ill-fated attempts. The relaxation-loving prince never paid suitably enough attention to learn properly how to arrange the record bookings of the regions of his father's realm. This set of delicate responsibilities is easily achieved, at least by someone capable and trained to do the work, unlike the oft-distracted underworld prince. A careful record must be kept of all expenses paid within the house, a delicately handled tabulation process which the prince is ill-equipped to fully undertake. A steadily updated ledger of the house's income in the form of brilliant gemstones, diamonds, darkness, and the like, is merely one among the prince's least liked aspects of his work. Records of expired house contractor renovations line a desk in the administrative chamber, though the prince has absolutely no desire now to organize them alphabetically by date. Attendance records of the working shades who toil for the house need to be verified, the shades' due compensation rapidly approved, and yet the prince cannot remember all the necessary steps. Disorderly Prince Zagreus gazes upon the endless stacks of parchment paper, each containing work details to be registered and neatly organized, and starts to feel his optimism fade. Prince Zagreus must have some favored tasks in the administrative chamber of the house, but surely none of them include the tasks demanding his attention here. Reviewing lists of claims from shades with grievances is a very important service of the house, or so Lord Hades once attempted to impress upon his willful son. At last, the work-disliking prince records a summary of the results of his attempts to be of any use to the administrative needs of his grim father's house. Ahem? Why, I never. Rude. But, Within the recesses of the administrative chamber lies the eldest sigil of the master's house, a symbol of the fate-given authority to rule beneath the earth, and means by which to travel the entirety of all that dark domain. Amongst the parchment records of the dead and punished are the sealed documents known as the Knave King's sentence, forcing said king to endlessly toil with a boulder till the end of time. Nestled among the towering administrative parchment work of the long-since deceased lies an old document concerning a special pact signed by a once-living court musician who attempted vainly to rescue his wife from death. A litany of complaints submitted by restless shades across the underworld must be evaluated, organized, and processed, but Prince Zagreus does not even know where to begin. Supplies on all the desks in the administrative chamber must be carefully maintained and neatly placed in a specific way, which the forgetful prince has not yet memorized in full. Security reports concerning failed escape attempts from Tartarus require timely verification and official response, neither of which Prince Zagreus is fit to give. The administrative chamber's ever-working shades remain utterly dedicated to their thankless toil, all because of an inspiring rendition of how dedicated they ideally should be. The cool, purified waters of the Styx are available in limitless supply to all servants of the god of the dead, authorized to work endlessly within the house administrative chamber. Having achieved his goal, the underworld prince discovers that the mortal realm is utterly bereft of the life-threatening excitement to which he has grown accustomed, and the lack of anything of note to do, the sheer mundanity, results in this. Buried deep within the archives, holding many binding pacts between Lord Hades and the dead, resides an old agreement, in exchange for services from an extraordinary warrior, for eternity within Elysium, for his dear partner. Thus was Hades, feared ruler of the dead, reunited with his long-lost bride, Persephone, the queen, and together with their firstborn son, Prince Zagreus, they would go on to reign eternally beneath the earth, in relative harmony. The queen's return marked an occasion of enthusiastic joy, so much as possible in that dark, gloom-filled realm of the dead. And even after all this time, Olympus never did discover what transpired there, in the underworld. Thus did all of Olympus journey deep into the underworld, all together, for the very first time. The queen Persephone revealed herself in all her splendor, much to their surprise, and told them everything she indicated to her son. After the shock subsided, the festivities began. When finally the great feast ended, all the Olympians returned to their mountain abode, fully satisfied. As for the house of Hades, it required thorough cleansing, from the rafters to the floor. Such revelry, of course, is unbecoming of the name of Hades, and the fearsome reputation of the underworld. For if mortals were to have no fear of death, then they would have no fear of anything at all. A well-kept family secret, then, this would live on to be. The surface treat-devouring hound of hell provides the queen a most decidedly affirmative response. In his lord father's very private chambers, Zagreus, the lock-removing prince, discovers a most delicately painted likeness of none other than Persephone herself. A coat of dust suggests it has remained here for some time. The stoic lord and master of the house possesses wealth beyond imagining, a portion of which he has used for a crisp set of attire for every passing day. The ghoulish features of the much reviled hound of hell all soften instantly upon the mention of a certain name. Briefly, then, The monster is at peace. The monstrous triple-headed beast of Hades would perhaps be overcome with pure emotion by the joyous circumstances, were he only capable of this. How infernal Cerberus, the Hound of Hell, managed to maintain civilized behavior throughout the duration of the recent feast remains a mystery to all who attended. The delectable taste of nectar is enough to briefly sate even the ferocious appetite of the Hound of Hell. Though having little appetite remaining for the lightness of nectar's flavor, the multi-headed monster of the underworld nevertheless accepts. The 6 eyes of the hideous Hound of Hell go wide at once from having received the exquisite gift of rare Olympian ambrosia. The creature is rather beside himself. The underworld prince's next attempt to bribe the monstrous triple-headed hellhound into further liking him proves once again successful, as the kingly gift of heavenly ambrosia is beyond compare. The bond between a hound and its master is as hard as adamant. Cerberus, the fearsome monster born of hell and guardian of its gates, answers firstly to the prince's father, but it turns out the prince may be the next best thing. Prince Zagreus implants in the impressionable, vicious watchdog of the underworld a new appetite for more destruction, to be sated in another age. Thus asks the prince his question of the guardian of the gates of hell, knowing full well the multi-headed monster keeps a wide berth of the river boatman. As to all with any sense, the ever-smiling, wine-washed countenance of the great Lord Dionysus now adorns the prince's chamber wall, thus radiating questionable influence. With its just-right softness and death-themed embroidery, the new bedding of Prince Zagreus is the envy of all those who wish to rest in peace. The light provided by the flames of deepest hell enhances the lounging area with a soft glow, and their warmth soothes the few living denizens there. Time seems to stand quite still within the eternal realm of the dead, evidenced even by the means of measuring its passage. A hidden stretch of the boundless river Styx cuts through misty Erebus, providing for the river boatman Charon a locale in which to deal with the unruliest of souls. Damned lost souls with nowhere left to turn congregate in deepest Tartarus, where they fuse together with the earth itself into odious forms which defy description. The most violent wretches of Tartarus are sealed away even from other condemned souls, their only visitors, those fool enough to attempt escape. The act of sorcery often ends in an untimely death and an eternity in Tartarus for careless souls, though some are able to perfect the trade and take up permanent residence elsewhere. The burning embers in the eyes of monstrous Cerberus, notorious Hound of Hell, reveal that he too is amenable to the pets of which the underworld prince speaks, and in fact is deeply grateful for the quantity of them. Thus, having once more gained the surface of his grim-faced father's realm beneath the earth, resourceful Zagreus makes his way toward the one-time abode of radiant Persephone. It is a journey of considerable distances, which he has already completed many times, and which has always ended in the same result. So, imagine he made it there with just time enough to water the crops and tidy up a bit before the hell-forged, multi-headed monster feels no urgency to waste his precious time on simple playthings, much preferring to conserve his vast energy reserves, in case any trespassers need to be eaten suddenly. The surface, wind-swept, racked by freezing cold, nonetheless instills within the prince a sense of awe and the sublime, for it is unlike anything that he has seen. All manner of fruits and vegetables thrive within the hidden gardens of Persephone, the one-time queen of all the underworld. A world of life, far from the realm of death. Having gained the surface once again, Prince Zagreus breathes deeply of the wildflowers and the roses and the like, among which one of them contains an allergen so intolerably potent that it causes this. As he journeys to his mother's cottage in the cold, loudly speaking Zagreus calls out to hear the echo of his voice, the blast of sound causing a substantive amount of ice and snow to break off from a nearby mountaintop and fall, and so complicated is the path to the well-hidden cottage of Persephone that surface-walking Zagreus, on this particular occasion, sadly zigs instead of zags, plummeting from off a precipice into most familiar waters. Amid the wondrous, ever-springing garden of Persephone, Prince Zagreus discovers a greenish plant of some sort, supple-skinned and covered all in spines. A bit too small to see, until it is too late. The limitless variety of fauna dwelling on the surface brings to Zagreus no shortage of delight. I have no new tales left to tell. But do not think that you have won, Prince Zagreus, for any tale worth telling is a tale worth telling again, and again, and again. Bye-bye. Horned creatures are familiar to Zagreus, having fought countless satyrs and the like, but he discovers this time that not even satyrs possess the sheer, ferocious power of a startled mountain goat. Snakes and serpents rank amongst the creatures somewhat known to Zagreus, due to their presence in the underworld, so it is with delight that he approaches one upon the surface, greeting it as a familiar friend. It greets him venomously back, using its fangs. Once more, tenacious Zagreus achieves his lofty goal, and just as every time before, except with some sort of new twist of fate, perhaps, he goes a little distance, then he dies. Having already seen the splendid cottage of Persephone sufficient times, the stubborn underworld prince nevertheless attempts to go there once again, although his memory of it shall have to do. Reflecting on his victory, Prince Zagreus observes how death can take hold in so many different ways, at times quite slowly, and at other times, the ancient casks of wine hidden within the recesses of the house of Lord Hades. Few have tasted the intoxicating vintage they contain, and fewer still are permitted anywhere near their vicinity. The hell-born monster Cerberus contentedly ignores the prince's callous, inconsiderate remark. The hound of hell barely regards the prince, having been sated for the time. The vicious, triple-headed Cerberus shows some restraint for now. Cerberus is too busy living in the lap of luxury to pay much heed. The monster Cerberus sits vigilant atop his bedroll. Each savage maw of Cerberus salivates in anticipation of the next time to feed. Terrifying Cerberus is busy gathering his strength for when next he shall bar the prince's path. The monster's solitary weakness, satyr sacs, proved terribly effective once again. Fang-bearing Cerberus directs all three of his attentions toward the satyr sac. The guardian of hell itself decides the time has come for a short break and snack. Prince Zagreus once more offers to Cerberus one of his favored sacs. Cerberus moves for no one, but for satyr sacs, he can make an exception. Vigilant Cerberus decides to look the other way this once. Each violent countenance of Cerberus agrees the satyr sac must be destroyed. After deliberating briefly, Cerberus concludes that yes, he shall accept the sack. The unrepentant monster Cerberus is thoroughly incapable of showing neither restraint nor remorse. The garden of Persephone the Queen, off limits to the prince throughout his life, now is laid bare to him at last in all its splendor. The ever-vigilant and terrifying Cerberus merely accepts the praise. She eloped with grim Lord Hades, she said, mothering a fire-stepping prince who sought to reconnect with his extended family. Hades and Persephone at first refused his wish, but so moved were they by his relentless struggles to the surface that at last they decided to heed their willful Zagreus and reach out. For his and everybody's sake. The Olympians listened to all this in stunned silence. Then Zeus himself began to laugh. "Welcome back into the family," he said, though when he makes an effort to communicate with one, its eyes so full of calm intelligence, he learns that bears are not as gentle as they seem. The Erinyes, known also as the Furies, they are the trusted sentinels of Lord Hades, charged with torturing the worst of mortal kind, and ridding the underworld of any fool enough to trespass where they do not belong. None other than those in the trusted inner circle of Lord Hades are authorized to enter the intricate chambers connecting the vast regions of the underworld. But the prince decides to barge in anyway. The stalwart casks of wine within the house of Hades now are almost entirely devoid of content, having bravely stood against the combined thirst of the Olympians during a certain feast. A majestic gilded edifice of Mount Olympus, crafted with the utmost care from the true mountain stone, now shines forever brightly, even in the dim light of the house of Hades, as a parting gift from the Lord Master's kin. The stone-inspecting prince gleans nothing more. Prince Agrius decides to go about his business. The underworld prince gawks needlessly at the visage of a distinguished poet. Surely the prince has more important objects to inspect.